Hello, everybody. Natasha Pennycook here, psychotherapist with Keep Six. Welcome to Keep Six. Welcome to the Keep Six platform. This is our Keep Six live series, Connect the Six. Today is going to be a great day. We are going to be speaking about racism, incarceration, and women with Dr. Rai Reece. Before we get started, I do definitely want to dedicate today's show to the memory of George Floyd. I don't know about you, but last night I couldn't sleep after, of course, before going to bed, scrolling and seeing the events of what had happened Monday night. And this is a hard time. So it's timely that today we are talking about racism and incarceration. So it's going to be a great show. As always, we encourage you to comment and put in your feedback and to ask questions. We are having Dr. Rai Reece today, and I'm definitely looking forward to today's show. You may notice I'm not my super exuberant self because I am mourning. I have been impacted by what is going on in the news and in the media, and I'm not going to lie, it is hard. It feels like a secondary trauma because George Floyd could have been my father, my brother, my husband, my child, and this is hard. So to his family, to his friends, to all of us who've been impacted by this, today's show is dedicated to George Floyd and the memory of him. So I know that Rai is on, Dr. Rai Reece, who's our guest for today. Rai, if you can see that button where it says request to join, please do. Also, Rachel is on. She is going to be fielding our questions. Today, I am also looking over at my computer. Rachel and I are communicating. So Rachel, let everyone also know that you are here, that they can ask their questions. Rai, I don't know, Rai, if you had requested to join. Oh, you did. I'm sorry. Send a request. Okay, I'm letting you in. I'm letting you in. You should be able to jump on in a second.
Hey.
Hey, Rai.
Hey, how are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm good. It's a heavy day, so
Heavy day.
I appreciated your comments at the beginning. I was gonna make mention of that as well. So it's heavy. It's heavy. So and I think you're right. Apropos, we're talking about Black women inside, and Black women have nephews and uncles and brothers and husbands and partners and sons, and it's just, I'm really angry as well. I'm angry. I'm hurt. I'm angry. I'm thinking about my nephews, and as you are as well. So it's this is a genocide on Black bodies. Yes. Being perpetuated and is continuing to be perpetuated, and it's so I think as per today's discussion, I think a lot is weighing on folks. And if I can maybe just, I know you're going to start, Natasha, but I just wanted to also just ask folks, if it's okay. I just want us to really think about forwarding videos that have the potential to re-traumatize. We know with the advent of social media that a lot of what's been happening to Black men and women and Black folks is not new. Those of us who have been living this every single day and have, it's not new. But I just think we need to be a bit more mindful when we retweet, reshare videos that definitely traumatize folks. And our community has a mental health crisis that nobody talks about, right? And so I just wanted to put that out there at the beginning, just because you were talking about George Floyd, and I know the impact of seeing that video is very visceral for people that can connect very deeply with that. So
and I appreciate that, because that's exactly what it feels to me. I was thinking this morning and I was like, I just feel so awful today. What is going on? And I know I didn't sleep last night, and I think that was because I had a really busy day yesterday, and I spent the end of the day, as a lot of us do before going to sleep, scrolling. And I just kept seeing the videos. And the thing is, I didn't watch the video at all. I did not watch it. So just seeing the image of the officer with the knee and like hand in pocket, so like nonchalant, as if like, right? It just, oh, and I don't know, for me, it reminded me of that scene in American History X. I don't know if anyone has seen.
I know the scene you're talking about on the I
Yeah,
know the scene you're talking about. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. And it just like the overwhelming emotion of it, it's heavy. And I feel it today. And it's, I was thinking about this getting ready for our talk today, that it's just it ties in very well with our discussion, because we are talking about race, anti-Black racism, and incarceration. We are talking about from a women's lens. However, it does impact all of us globally as a global unit of Black people, a Black community of Black communities. We are impacted by this.
Absolutely. 100%.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, yeah. Thank you, everyone who's here again. Put in your comments, put in your questions. We are hoping we have time today. It's a heavy day, a heavy topic. Unfortunately, timely topic to be having this discussion. So, Ray, I did not even introduce you, so I don't know if you mind. Do you want to tell us a bit about yourself, who you are, what you do, why you do it?
Oh, thank you. So, well, first, let me say, I want to also acknowledge, of course, we're definitely acknowledging, what's happened to George Floyd. And I also want to acknowledge our land as settlers on this land, and that was stolen from Indigenous folks. And our Black ancestors walked in their moccasin footprints as well. And I think it's always really important that we locate ourselves in spaces whenever we're having discussions that are far reaching. Because we're going to talk, of course, today about Black women inside, but folks know that there's a disproportionate number of Indigenous folks inside as well, right? So there are parallels, there are connections. So I just want to pay homage in whatever way I can and really acknowledge. And I try and do this in my work. I'll talk about, I don't really want to talk about myself too much because I want to talk about the issue, but I will say that I'm a professor in community justice at Humber College. I've been there for 8 years, teaching in a fantastic program. I teach courses on the introduction to the Canadian criminal justice system, ethics and community justice, and a course on institutional correctional practices, which really is about the inner workings of jails and prisons. I'm soon going to be moving to Ryerson, so I'm excited about that in July. So that's amazing, and I'm very honored and grateful to have that opportunity and continue my work and my research. I've been working in some capacity doing research and with folks inside and outside of prison since doing research since 2002. Went into my first joint, my first prison in 2005, and also want to give a really quick shout out to PJAC, which is the Prisoners Justice Action Committee, no longer in existence, but this is actually one of the first, it was the first grassroots organization that introduced me to working with folks inside in a really critical scholar activist way. And we put on the first Prisoners Justice Film Festival in 2003 in Toronto. It was never done before. So I just want to shout out those folks. And also I see some of my students who have signed on here. That's nice. So cool. Yeah. And my crew is here. C is here. May is here. So I just wanted to put that out there. So, I mean, I'm ready to get started in the discussion. We don't need to talk about me so much.
Yeah. I think one thing that is really important is that because we're doing this on the Keep Six platform, and everyone out there knows that I volunteer and I work with Keep Six. Ray has also joined our Keep Six team, and it's fantastic to have you there, to have you on, to be able to have these hard discussions together, and also to be able to support the organization that we're doing. And as we have seen, there are a lot of our people, Black, Brown, Indigenous brothers and sisters who are incarcerated. So to have you on with your wealth of knowledge or expertise, it's amazing. So welcome.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. Thanks for being here. So I know that you were doing some community-based programming inside and also post-release. Tell us a bit about that. I know you had some doing like sexual health and pre-apprenticeship, and you won some awards for these amazing research that you've done. So please tell us about this.
Yeah, sure. No, my pleasure. So I started conducting research in 2002. So but really intellectualizing. So it was a long time. I was just starting my PhD work, and it was really about learning about the system, right? And I was really interested in, like a lot of folks, there's a bit of a fascination around prisons because we don't understand how they work. So in 2006, I started working for an organization called PASAN, which is the Prisoners HIV/AIDS Support Action Network. And at that time, they were the only organization in Canada that was doing work inside and post-release with folks who were HIV positive. So I was hired to coordinate and run the women's prison programming. And it was a really unique position because it gave me the opportunity to work in both the provincial and the federal system, going in on a monthly basis, sometimes twice a month, to Vanier, which is the bucket that's attached to Maplehurst in Milton, as well as the only federal institution for women in Ontario, which is Grand Valley Institution. So I really started my work there, working with folks on the front line from a community-based perspective and providing sexual health programming. And it was great because it gave me an opportunity not only to meet with women one-on-one, but also to do groups. So what was interesting about this type of program inside was that at first I noticed there weren't a lot of Black women who were coming to my sessions. Right. And I was struck by that because I knew that there were women inside. I would see them when I would go in, but they weren't coming to my program. So what I realized then, that there was so much stigma because it was like, oh, here comes the HIV sexual health worker. You know, there's already so much stigma when you are thinking about race and class and sexuality. And so women didn't want to be, I guess, attached or labeled with a specific program. So I started to get the word out. And I said, listen, if they just want to vibe and they just want to talk, I don't work for the system, you know, just come in. And sure enough, within a matter of weeks, I would have women, and there's no disclosure necessary. There was women who were coming, and we would have these great conversations with Black women and other women about what was happening inside the joint, right? And I really used the sexual health platform as a way to connect with women inside.
Okay, amazing.
Yeah.
Amazing. I really like this. So like, I know it was towards HIV and AIDS, but were other sexual health concerns coming up?
Oh, absolutely. I ran my programs, and I'll say I ran them with the women. So I would always ask them, you know, what do y'all want to talk about today? It didn't have to be HIV focused, even though that was what I was there to do. But lots of other things would come up. Intimate partner violence would come up because domestic violence is a health issue. So we would talk about that. Other sexual health concerns that they had, not just HIV, but other STIs, transmission, you know, whatever have you. We talk a lot about hepatitis C because folks don't realize that Hep C is actually easier, if I dare say, to be transmitted inside of a prison than HIV. So I debunked some of the myths around that, and there is a high percentage of folks who contract Hep C inside of jails and prisons because they're sharing their rigs, like their works. So I'm using all this prison language. They're sharing their needles inside, you know, out of necessity, right? And so we really talked about a whole plethora of issues.
Okay. Wow. And that's good. It's good that you had that space, right? I always talk about creating space. It's great that you had that space to bring that program and to allow the women that you were speaking with and working with to be able to give voice to things that were of their concern, especially inside.
Yeah, absolutely. It was, you know, I really, you know, I have to really give a shout out to the women that I've worked with over the years. They have been incredibly generous. And prisons are highly contested spaces. There is a huge trust issue when you're working inside, of course, around confidentiality, and even just a huge piece around vulnerability, right? And so I really have tried over the years, when I've done research, to always make sure that it's from, you know, I call it like research for justice, right? So it's like a really integrated process where it's not about me kind of going in from a top-down approach and saying, okay, I'm here to use you as subjects, but I really want folks to be invested in the work that I'm producing.
Amazing. And tell us about the pre-apprenticeship program.
Yeah, so the pre-apprenticeship program. So I'm very proud of this work. This is the work that I received the research award for at Humber. So this is a really unique program. So Humber College has the only, as far as I know, the only apprenticeship program that is connected to a carceral space, and that is the Vanier Correctional Center for Women in Milton. They have a program, it's called the Horticulture Technician Pre-Apprenticeship Program. It's a very long title. And that program allows women who are incarcerated at the Vanier Correctional Center for Women to participate in getting their level 1 landscape apprenticeship, right? So it's a 20-week program. over 300 hours, and they learn plant science and how to build planter boxes and really all the intricacies about horticulture and landscape. The program is taught by faculty from Humber College who travel to the jail, and the women take the program and they have all, they complete their testing and their deliverables. At the end of the program, they receive, once they've completed it and they've passed their courses, they receive a certificate of completion in their level 1 landscaping pre-apprenticeship. And the great thing about this program is that it does not say it's from Vanier Correctional Center. So it's a certificate from Humber. And I really want to highlight this point because one of the things I'm sure we're going to talk about, and I think we've talked about it at Keep Six, is there's such a huge need for transferable skills, particularly in the trade for folks when they're coming out of jails and prisons, right? And so what this program allows is for women to receive their level 1, have a certificate, a piece of currency, if you will, for them to at least have something that's a little viable when they're post-release. Now, one of the concerns with the program, what I found through my research, so I interviewed women inside. I had a great RA, Justine Moritz, working with me. We did focus groups, we did one-on-one interviews, and we did an art-based focus group. I noticed there weren't a lot of Black women in this program. Okay. And I wanted to know why. Because I've been going into Vanier, remember when I was working with Passon, I was going into Vanier for almost 5 years consistently. I knew there were Black women at this jail, but they weren't in this program. So what I wanted to find out, and this ties into what we're talking about today and the way that racism works and social structural power, is I was like, where are the sisters at, right? Like, where are all these Black women? Because I know they're here. I'm seeing them when I'm walking through. So what I realized, or what I found out, is that the program really caters to women who are units 3 and 4, which are what we would call work ranges, or women who are, I guess, easier to manage, shall we say, right, in the prison. A lot of the Black women, right? A lot of the Black women that are housed at Vanier and Indigenous women and other racialized women are housed in Unit 2. Unit 2 is a lockdown unit. It's also a unit where you have women who struggle with high mental health needs. So if you think about it, women have to be screened into the program, right? You're not going to have access to being screened into this program if you're in Unit 2, or if you struggle with high mental needs, or if the institution deems you hard to manage, right? So your movement and your access to programming gets curtailed. And what we know is systemically, Black women, Indigenous women, women who are seen as hard to manage, women who struggle with mental health are more often than their white counterparts are placed in SEG, or they're placed on lockdown ranges, right? So they don't have that kind of access to the program, right?
Yeah. And I'm so happy that you brought that up, because it does it ties in so well with a lot of things that we see, right? It's the criminalization of Black bodies.
Absolutely.
So, right, it falls right into there. And here you are seeing it in action, going in and trying to offer a program for betterment. And then there are all these barriers from the inside. So it just goes right within everything that is going on currently and what we're speaking about today. So women's incarceration, it doesn't get a lot of coverage and focus as a male counterpart. So what are some of the statistics? Do you have any of the statistics surrounding female incarceration in Canada?
I do. I don't have these memorized. I'm getting a little up there in age, so I don't have my stats memorized the way that I used to. So I'm just gonna literally just look at my screen here and read.
Go for it.
I'll just read the stats first. Okay, so here's what's interesting. So before I read the stats, remember this, folks.
Write it down.
Black people, roughly, we make up about 4%, 3.5–4% of the overall Canadian population, just people in general, roughly. Not a lot.
3 to 4% of the overall Canadian population will identify as Black.
Black, Caribbean, African, some configuration.
Okay.
In the prison system, right, Black folks make up about 8.6%. And these are stats right from CSC. These are recent stats from 2018, right? So about 8.6% of the federal prison population. So you see that disproportionality glaring right there, okay? We know in Canada, overall, we're at about 38,700 folks incarcerated overall. Of those 38,000 folks, 14,000 of them reside in the federal system, and another 24,000 are in the provincial system. Okay, Of those 14,000 federally sentenced folks, 676 of them represent women. Okay. Of those 676 women that are incarcerated, Black women comprise about 9.12. So it's about 60 women. It's not a lot of women. It's not a lot of women, right? In the federal system. In the provincial system, about 6,000 folks overall, but harder to track numbers because of the high turnover in the provincial system, right? So often harder to track, right? So if you think about it, Black women don't represent a large proportion of the number of women who are incarcerated federally, right? There's not a lot, right? So that means that when we start talking about racism and we start talking about sexism, Black women kind of reside in this liminal space. We talk about racism, we focus on Black men, which we should, and we absolutely should continue to.
Yeah.
We talk about sexism, and white women tend to be the focus of any discussions around gender and sexism. So Black women are kind of left in this liminal space where they're not being considered when we're talking about racism. They're not being considered when we're talking about sexism, right? And so there you have this lack of intersectional analysis that takes place, right? And so I do want to also mention, because I think this is really important since we're talking about stats, of the women, the Black women that are incarcerated federally, the majority of them are incarcerated for what we call, or what is called, Schedule 2 offenses. Those are drug offenses, right? So that's not drug trafficking as in kind of the larger scale. We're talking about drug muling, women that are moving drugs, injecting them or passing them on their body across borders, right? So this means, right? So what this means, and I find this really interesting, is what this means is when we're talking about Black women's incarceration, we are not just talking about Black women's incarceration. We are
human trafficking falls in there. Yeah.
We're talking about the feminization of poverty. We're talking about anti-Black racism and the way in which Black women's position in society, right, has them making choices, right? And that's not to pathologize women. I'm not saying that there's, any pathology around Black women being in contact with the criminal justice system. What I'm saying is incarceration is not just one thing. It is wholeheartedly connected to economics and class, right? And of course, racism, right? And the healthcare system and immigration systems and educational systems, right? It's not just one piece. So when we look at Black women inside, we have to look at a broader relational, experience that they're having in terms of the system.
Yeah, for sure. I love that you said that, because it shows that all of the systemic barriers that are there and how there's the interplay and how it falls within the criminal justice system, especially for Black women. And I had mentioned human trafficking. I've been doing some work through this COVID time on domestic violence and human trafficking and things like that. And it just resounds so much of what is going on. If these Black women and these Black bodies are being used essentially to house drugs and to transport them around, then what is really happening here to a Black body that look like you and I? Right. Exactly. It goes deeper. Absolutely. So why is focusing on women in the prison system so important? Why is it so important?
I'm really glad we're having this conversation, because I think focusing on Black women, again, just, the numbers are small, so they tend to get left behind, right? They remain the silent, forgotten majority. And I want to borrow here from the work of Robin Maynard, who wrote an incredible book called Policing Black Lives. And in it, she really makes this argument around Black women being both simultaneously visible and invisible at the same time, right? So again, the conversation really begins, like you mentioned, well before the criminal justice system, well before women come in contact with the system. I won't say conflict, because I don't believe the system is neutral, right? So it begins with policing of certain bodies, of surveillance, of the designation of which bodies are actually profitable historically within the context of building this country, Canada, as a nation, right? And so when you look at the fact, so you look at women, Black women are blamed for their poverty, right? So we're poor because we want to be poor, right? And then if you assert yourself, now you're aggressive, right? You're the angry Black woman who still doesn't fit into the feminine scripts of femininity and womanhood and all those things, right? So you're rendered invisible, you don't matter, and then you're rendered visible because what you represent also doesn't matter. So it's like this simultaneous juggling, right? And so, when we focus upon Black women in the system, it's really important to realize that we're talking about bodies which have residual trauma around physical and sexual abuse, right? We're talking about populations that have mental health struggles that people aren't talking about. We're talking about substance use. We're talking about Black women who are criminalized because they are trans. right? We're talking about Black women who are criminalized because they engage in sex work, or the assumption that every Black woman is engaged in sex work, right? Which then connects to policing and surveillance, right? And so all of these pieces are so much bigger than the actuality of incarcerating a Black woman, right? So that's why I think it's important. And then, of course, the difficult conversation, which no one ever really wants to talk about, is white privilege and white supremacy, right? And really, really having a concretized conversation about what that looks like and the way in which it plays out on Black women's bodies every single day, right? In the criminal justice system, in the healthcare system, right? I know we're going to talk about COVID in a little bit, right? In the educational system, in the employment system, right? So all of these ways in which these tropes and these narratives get cast onto Black women's bodies, right? Well before they get, they come in contact with the system, right? And then they get exacerbated by the system, right? By being in
exactly.
Right.
Exactly. I mean, you really talk about the interplay of colonialization, anti-Black racism, and feminism, and how it's all impacted by incarceration and the criminal justice system. Do you have any more to say on that?
Yeah, I think that's, this is a really great question, Natacha, because for me, this is really where understanding how incarceration works, right? So, okay. So if we unpack it, if we really look at the power of history, I argue that the very first carceral process that ever took place with Black bodies, we got to go right back to the continent, right? So the chaining of Black folks, the enslaving, right? Because we weren't slaves, the enslaving of Black folks, right? The shuffling of us in shackles through the door of no return at Cape Castle in Ghana, the warehousing of us onto slave ships to make the transatlantic voyage and depositing us literally in different parts of the world. That is the very first carceral process that ever took place. 15.5 million Black folks literally in chains and shackles, right? We see the reformation of this. You look at any convict lease system in any prison in Angola in the United States, in any prison that uses bodies for labor, and you see the reformation of historical processes of colonialism, right? So that's the first process, right? So now you take that and you move it along contemporarily. You have Black women now who are chattel, who are labeled as chattel, who are raped, and who's the production of that rape. So they're reproductive, they have no reproductive choice. So the reproduction of those rapes, those children are used for as commodities in the slave process, right? So now you have the discourse contemporarily now of Black women as parasites, as welfare queens, as crack whores, all of these narratives that are labeled and tagged onto our bodies, right? And all of these things not only shape her position or our position in society, but they shape her self-worth, right? They shape her self-worth, and they send messages around internalization, right? And they send messages around use value, right? So all of these scripts of femininity and of profitability get tagged onto Black women, right? She's the bad mother. She's the woman who needs her children taken away from she's not worthy. And here it is now, we wonder, what do we do? So now you bring in governmental processes, right? And the way to manage a population that you don't seem as desirable in the process of building Canada as a nation is you govern them, and you survey them, and you police them, and you warehouse them. So you create residential schools for Indigenous folks, and you create prisons and reformatories for Black folks. And the two of these processes run in parallel, right? And then right? And so that governance and the policing and the surveillance and the control continues, and it cross-pollinates with other areas of the criminal justice system, right? And that's why I say, I'll just say this one last point. This is why I've said in the past, and I will continue to say, and you and I have had this conversation, the system isn't broken, right? People always say, we need to reform. No, the system isn't broken because the system was never designed with us in mind. It's not like the founding forefathers of Canada were sitting down thinking, how best can we help support Indigenous and Black
everybody?
No, they were thinking about how to keep their power entrenched, how to keep that, the theory of class and socioeconomic prosperity for them. So the system, you can't rely on a system that was never designed for you. You can't get justice from a system that was never designed with you in mind. It was designed to warehouse you. That's why the prison industrial complex is working exactly the way it's supposed to work.
The way it was supposed to work, exactly.
There's no broken system. This is designed. It's completely orchestrated, right?
Yes, yes,
Yeah.
yes. Thank you. Thank you. People are saying thank you, and I'm saying thank you for saying that, because this is a conversation that you have and I have had, and it's also a conversation that I have had with many of my colleagues. And there, people do talk about like the system being broken. And if you think about the system and the many different areas of the system, from the
Right.
criminal justice system to the education system to the various educational systems, even the healthcare system, right?
Absolutely.
These are all systems that have been put in place not for us. We're now, people like you, myself, our colleagues are working to make the system better for us to fit into. But the way the systems were created, they were never created for us. We are now
Never.
working to make this so that we have place within the system, so we can have our voice within the system, so we can make sure that we are taken care of within the system that is supposed to be a system for all of us.
Absolutely.
Right? We're trying to
Absolutely.
make it include us within the system. How do you feel about the criminal justice system? Do you feel that it's that it adequately attains to the various needs of Black and racialized women prisoners?
The short answer, no. The short answer, Natasha, is no. Okay, so if you build a prison, right, you have to fill
Yeah.
it, right? If you build a prison is profitable. So if you build a prison, you have to fill it. And the easiest way to build a prison is to do what? Go and warehouse people who have the least socioeconomic power, who have the least political power, who have the least cultural power. Go to people who are poor, who are undereducated, right, or uneducated. Right? It's the easiest thing to do. Pick up people like, for, dime bags and drug offenses and warehouse them, right? Fracture families, take Black men out of community and put them in comfortable spaces, right? And have those household incomes completely dip and completely drop, right? And so, no, I don't, the short answer is no, I don't believe the system. You can't have a system that is not equipped to deal with trauma. Prisons are not rehabilitative spaces, right? They're not. They're not places where you can get help for substance use, right? They're not places that are going to have, overarching, medical care involved in your mental health. So the system cannot adequately address the needs of Black women or Black folks or people who are racialized, because the perpetrators of violence in our country, the Canadian state, is perpetrating violence by continually warehousing people, right? So you can't rely on the state for your healing if the state is a perpetrator in the production of that pain, right? You can't. It can't work, right? And so when you think about that, you think about the complexity of Black women's lives. Like we mentioned, child welfare and mental health, right? And you think about residual trauma that doesn't get dealt with, right? Prisons can't address that, right? People say, okay, you're
re-traumatizing spaces.
Folks, right? You're not going to learn a lesson. What lesson are you trying to teach me when I've been struggling, right? So prisons are not conducive. The criminal justice system doesn't have the mechanism, I believe, in place to actually deal with what the kind of trauma that's residual. We were talking about George Floyd, when we started this, and I keep thinking about, my nephews and people, the Black men in my lives that are, playing important roles to their family, and how incredibly, what do you have to do with yourself to just manage what has just happened yet again, right? And so how can the criminal justice system, people are saying these 4 cops got fired. Okay, congratulations, your pension is still good. Okay, and what? Like, who's got next in the murder charges, really, right? So are we going to see, what are we going to see? What are we going to see, right?
Yeah, I love that you said that, because that's actually exactly on point of what I was thinking today. Who is going to be charged for his murder? Because that's exactly what it is. It is murder. Okay, the 4 of them got fired. Okay, they have their pension. They get to go home to their families, right? They get to go home to their families. The family of George Floyd, they're not going to see him again. They're now planning his funeral.
Absolutely.
Right? So who is going to be charged with his murder?
Yeah.
That's my question. And I know it's a question a lot of you may have, and it's a question that's probably never going to be answered. It's going to be lingering there, like many questions that we may have. But that would be true criminal justice. That someone has to answer for his murder. Okay. Yeah. So what about the transition needs? Because we're talking about the healing, the trauma, the re-traumatization within a criminal justice system, the within the system. But what about the needs, the transition needs from incarceration to reintegration, risk management, and also to decreased reoffending rates
Yeah.
to reoffense. Yeah.
You know, I think I'm really glad you asked this question because
Mm.
when I did for my doctoral work, I did like this huge project at Grand Valley Institution for Women. And it was the first research project of its kind in Canada that really interviewed Black women who were federally incarcerated. And I specifically wanted to talk about reintegration processes, right? And so I think this is a really interesting connection because every single woman that I interviewed, it wasn't a huge study. I interviewed about 11 women. Every single woman that I interviewed said, the programming that we are taking here is not relevant to our lived experience as Black women. And the majority of the women that I interviewed in 2007 that had drug-related offenses have to take a program called WOSAP. It's WOSAP. It's the Women Offender Substance Abuse Program. So if you come in with a drug-related charge in the federal system, you have to take this program, right? So of course, here's the other thing. So when you go into the federal system as well, you have what's called the CP, or a correctional plan. And your correctional plan stipulates all the programs and all the things you got to do. And when you go to boards, you want that plan to be full, right? So these Black women would go to WOSAP because they had drug muling charges associated with them, drug muling charges. The program addresses women who use drugs. So there's a disconnect there. So these women now, they're saying, great, we go to this program because we got to go to this program. We sit in the program, we're not active, we're not engaged, and then my truth gets rewritten by the PO who now reads this as non-compliant. So that messaging, someone else's truth, goes into my correctional plan, right? And so here it is now, you go up for boards and you read this and it doesn't show that you've engaged or that you're willing to, because the program is not applicable to your life. Okay, so parking lot that for a minute. I did that in 2007. Fast forward to 2014 now, and the Office of the Correctional Investigator, they released their final report on the Black experience in federal incarceration. And wouldn't you know it, in that report, 2014, 7 years after my report, it says programs are not culturally relevant to Black folks who are inside. Programs do not address the cultural nuances and the idiosyncrasies of Black culture, right? Programs are not applicable, etc. Everything that I had said 7 years earlier, right? Now being said in this official report by the OCI, which is important, right? So then I think, okay, so here it is now, we're back to square one. You've got fear, stigma, you've got incarceration, a criminal record, and you have no transferable skills upon your release. But you asked me about risk, right? And so when I think of risk, right, I'm going to also borrow from Robin Maynard and quote her directly. She says, to be Black is to be perceived as risk. So even before we get into all the fundamental pieces around what risk looks like in terms of recidivism rates, right, we have to remember that Black folks, the perception, your Blackness in and of itself designates a risk, right? Because of the historical stereotypical narratives of Black folks being unintelligent, more prone to violence, right, undereducated, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So your Blackness in and of itself, right, is what starts the conversation. Okay, now it's like, is this person a risk to society? Well, how about we ask, is society a risk to this person? Maybe that might be a different way of asking the question, right? Let's really think about the fact that most folks who are inside are not there. There are not a lot of lifers that are Black folks, right? There are not a lot of folks who are there for violent crimes, right, in terms of the overall prison population, right? So let's really look at what risk means, right? And, the R&R model, so the risk needs responsivity model, which is highly used in corrections, right, which did not have a gender component to it at all. I've also written about this, right? That R&R model is based on a male cognitive format. It is not an R&R model that really delves into power and privilege and racism, right? It is about criminogenic needs, right? And risk and recidivism rates. So for me, the question around risk is always so much more than, is this person a danger or poses a risk to society? No, let's flip the script a little bit, right? And ask the question in a different way, right? And really think about what risk means. Yeah,
exactly. Like thinking about how society is going to support this person's release. Absolutely. Switching it up. I love that. And there is a lot of truth. Like, Black people, as we know, we are seen as a threat from the moment we walk through the door.
Absolutely.
So how is now society set up to be able to support this individual?
Right.
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 Starting from that point, before you even get to what it is that this person did, how is society really set up to support this individual so they don't go back inside?
Right. Right. What is
I wanted,
yeah. Go ahead. Yeah.
Go ahead. No, I was just going to say, I wanted to take some time to answer some questions. So definitely give us your last point.
Yeah, I was just going to also mention, we were talking about risk, and I wanted to also remind folks that classification inside of federal joints is really, really important, because in order for to cascade from max to medium to minimum, minimums are camps, right? You need to have a high classification that shows that you are not a risk to the public for getting your ETAs, which are your escorted temporary absences, or your UTAs, which are unescorted temporary absences, right? So that configuration of even assessing risk, right, it really starts at admissions and discharge when you go in and you're sitting with your PO and they're looking at your sheet. And of course, it's going to be based on what your charges are, of course, right? I do get that, right? But you have to also remember that we know, based on research, that Indigenous folks and Black folks are maxed out more than their white counterparts. And when you are in max, it is harder for you to cascade your points to move through the system, right? I don't think it's an accident that at Joyceville Institution, where I've also been to several times, that of the over 750 men, a large majority of the Black men who are housed in Ontario are housed at Joyceville. And Joyceville historically is known to be one of the hardest joints to cascade to a camp, to get to a camp from, right? It is so hard for your classification rating to move. Right? Is that social structure? Was that an accident? No, I don't necessarily think so, right? So that's why I'm saying the conversation around risk it cross-pollinates with so many other areas of the system, right? But let's take some questions. You said you had some, yeah, sure.
Yes. So there's a number of questions that I wanted to be able to get to because we have about 10 minutes or so. So someone was asking, are women open to psychotherapy in the prison individually or through group?
So it's a question that women are being given it, or so there are no.
Are they offered?
So there are no psychotherapy programs, structured programs inside of jails or prisons. There is psych evals, of course, that take place. There's access to therapy and counseling, but the kind of counseling in terms of psychotherapy to be offered on a consistent basis does not exist.
Right? No. Okay, great. Well, not great, but yeah. I'm trying to go through some of these questions. Someone wrote, it's not set up to support us. No, the system's not set up to support us. That's exactly what we have been saying. So understanding that the system needs to be set up to support us. When a system is not created to support us, it's right. There's a contraindication there. So there's work to be done. Someone's asking, make this available. Yes, definitely we will. This will be on our IGTV as well as it will be up on the Keep Six YouTube page. Rachel, if you can help me with some of the questioning, I'm going through a number of things. Okay, so someone's asking, there is still a possibility that these 4 men can get their jobs back, or they can get jobs as policemen in other states, referring to George Floyd. Yeah, right. It's true. There's truth on that.
That is true. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, we should do a whole we could do a whole separate show on policing and processes and just movement of particular bodies, and yeah, we definitely could. And the person is absolutely right. It's not unlikely that these folks can get another job in another state, or another job in some sort of policing or law enforcement faction, right? Not impossible.
Right.
Yeah.
Very true. Someone has a comment. I think we should not want to be included in a system designed to break us. We need to heal and change outside of that. Unity and progress as a collective diaspora. Definitely. I definitely believe that as a community, as a Black community of Black communities, that's what I usually say, we do need to heal. We need to heal. We need to be able to be in a place where we could band together and support each other, because we know that these systems are not created for us. So how can we as a collective be able to really support each other within the systems that are impacting us?
Yeah. So let me pick up on your point there, Natacha, and also the comment. So you know, one of the things that the report also found, and I found in my research as well, right? The 2014 report I'm talking about is, if we want to build a collective community around solidarity and supporting folks who are coming out post-release, one of the things the report found is that there are not enough community connections to support people leaving. So what folks don't realize, or may not realize, is that when you are exiting a prison, you go to a halfway house, right? That's your first step. When you're at that halfway house, this is the step in terms of you cascading back into society, right? There you have a better chance or a greater chance for success, obviously, if there are community supports in place. And they will ask you this at board, right? The pro board will ask you, what connections do you have for family support? What connections do you have in the community, right? So as Black folks, we really need to put away with this kind of ideology that has been ingrained through whiteness and white supremacy, that we don't help each other, that we don't support each other, right? And really think about healing and building community connections. Folks who are exiting systems, carceral spaces, need community connections for success. They need community connections. If you are a Black small business owner, hire somebody who's coming out, right? If you have connections with support groups, or you are a counselor, you know, offer counseling on a sliding scale, or offer, like, I don't know, 3 or 4 sessions, do them pro bono, right? If you have networks or connections with really good lawyers, like lawyers that are progressive and woke, make those connections for folks who are going to need them when they're coming out, right? So there's so many ways that we can support people. And this is one of the things that folks inside will say is, you know, I'm afraid when I get out, because you will have conditions on you, right? And you will have to abide by those conditions because your warrant hasn't expired yet. So you're still on parole with a warrant expiry date, could be 2, 3, 4 years from now, right? So you've got to find a way to live and survive and not breach those very stringent conditions that CSC is going to put on you. And the best way to do that is to have a really strong community connection and solidarity, right? Where you have that support that's in place, right? To help you succeed.
Definitely. Definitely. Richard is asking, are there any support for women once they complete the trade course and release? What's any support there?
Yeah, so that's an excellent question. So to my knowledge, and this is how we lose women coming out of the provincial system often, there is some follow-up that is done, but it's not, what I'll say is the follow-up is done on a case-by-case basis if you can keep in contact with the women, right? So to say that there's something structurally embedded, no, there is not, right? No, there is not something structurally embedded that would follow up women who come out of the horticulture program. Yeah. And I will say, I also wanted to add this point that a lot of the women that took the program, successfully completed the program, they have a graduation ceremony and everything. You know, what I thought was really great is they said they were so empowered by being able to complete a college level program and get a student number, right? Because Humber issued them all student numbers, right? And so that, like, something that sounds so simple and maybe trivial to us on the outside is a really big deal when you're inside, right? That building of empowerment and knowing that you can complete a program. And even the women that didn't, you know, they were like, some women were like, Ray, I'm not interested in going into landscape horticulture. They're like, but I now know that I can do a college program, right? Like, I know there's a possibility that I can also succeed in another area, right?
Right. Yeah, for sure. Richard is also saying it would be good to connect these women with the union. So this is Richard Miller from Keep Six. So Richard, great idea. We definitely can work on that. Something that we definitely can work on. I saw a comment from one of my sister colleagues from Oakland, California was here. Hi, Patricia. I'm so glad you're able to join us. I'm looking for your question. Sorry, everyone. There's so much engagement, which is amazing. Amazing. I'm scrolling through everything. So yes, Patricia, Dr. Patricia Noonley from Oakland, California. She's also one of my colleagues and sister friends from the Association of Black Psychologists. She's saying, Ray, that what you're speaking is truth and on a very deep level. So yes, definitely, it is. It is.
Appreciate that.
Ray, someone is also asking for the stats that you gave. Is there any way that we can get that? Maybe we can put something together. We could include it on our Instagram page for Keep Six.
Absolutely. And I also, because I always teach my students about vetting stats, and I'm like, you know, stats, don't rely heavily on stats. These stats I got directly from CSC, and I could more than happy to share them. People are not numbers, right? And so we need to always be cognizantly mindful of not getting caught up wholly, because I've had conversations with folks who say, oh, well, that's only, Black women are only 9%, like what's the big deal, right? And so that's why I'm saying I think the stats are good for a foundational guideline, but people are not numbers, and we need to always be viscerally mindful of that fact whenever we look at any stats, right? And vet them and think of how they connect, like I mentioned, and how they cross-pollinate to other systems of oppression, right, in our society. Yeah.
Yeah. And that's exactly why I said, let's unpack the stats of what it actually means. Because yes, you're looking at these numbers and it's like, okay, well, 6% here, 8% there. But actually, once you open it up, unpack it, and really lay it out within the system, what does it actually mean? So I'm so glad you took the time to do that.
No problem.
So if anyone has any questions, now's your time to get them in. If you've been sitting on them and holding it and digesting all that we've been speaking about, now's your time to get them in. We have about 5 minutes roughly. Rai, so how has COVID-19 impacted programming and prisoner release plans?
Okay, so and we have like 7 minutes. Okay, so
yes, we do.
COVID-19, and I only said that because that's like another session altogether, right? COVID-19 is not, let me start by saying COVID-19 is not the great equalizer, because there's a lot of populist narrative that's taking place where people are saying, oh, finally COVID-19 is hitting rich folks and white folks and Black folks. It is not an equalizer. And we know this because we see which communities have been decimated by COVID-19. Even in the beginning, access to testing, people didn't realize access to testing was highly racialized, because the testing was, have you traveled? Have you done this? Have you done that? Right? And so the focus on testing being really connected to travel was a class-based imperative, right? Yes. Most folks who are doing, and I don't refer to folks as essential workers, but most folks who are doing sacrificial work, because they are sacrificing, are racialized folks who are not snowbirds, who are not traveling, right, a lot, right? And so we really need to think, again, make those connections. So COVID-19 is not the great equalizer. It has exacerbated what many of us who have been doing work with folks inside for many years know, is that prisons are hotbeds for viruses to multiply. Prisons are unsanitary. It is impossible virtually to physically distance in a prison. It's impossible to have cleaning supplies, access to cleaning supplies, right? And, having been in a number of jails and prisons myself, if one cold, even a common cold, it literally ravages a range, right? It just spreads like wildfire. So what CSC and the ministry have done in releasing over 2,000 folks, right, in the provincial system, and people probably don't know that last week and a half ago, CSC released about 600 federal prisoners very quietly, right? Very quietly, 600 federal prisoners in the country were released, right? And so what folks don't know is prisoners had to apply for early release or extenuating circumstances. So again, the applications will come, but the vetting of those applications and who, based on them being close to the completion of their sentence, their release will be contingent on that. So what COVID-19 has done, right, is actually really highlighted that when people come out of the system, they are not necessarily better off. You come out with housing, food, and income insecurities, right? And so the releasing of people during COVID, many who were doing dead time or remand as it's called, right, really highlights the fact that they probably didn't need to be there in the first place, quite frankly, right? They probably didn't need to be there. And also there are a whole host of other structural issues that are not in place to accommodate and best support people when they are getting out, right? They're not there because that's why you find around homeless populations really high numbers of folks who were formerly incarcerated, right? It's like this burgeoning kind of underground that people don't really know about. And the numbers are high because when you come out, if you have conditions on you and you have non-association clauses on you, you can't go back to where you're from. You really can't, right? And so you've got to find another way to try and survive and try and live. So COVID-19 is highlighting all of these pieces. And again, right, prisoners are always the last to get any sort of support. It's a human rights disaster, in my opinion. And Al Jones in Nova Scotia has said this as well. Like when you're housing people during a pandemic, right, and not providing basic fundamental human rights, that is inhumane. It's fundamentally inhumane. Yeah.
Yeah. I've been calling COVID-19 a global trauma. And if you look at it from this perspective, it is a human rights crisis, a global trauma, and it's a mental health disaster.
Absolutely. And it will continue to be, right? Because the residual effects of COVID-19, we haven't even begun to see that yet, right? We haven't even begun to scratch the surface of the residual effects of COVID-19 and how that is going to impact around anti-Black racism, right? And how it's going to impact bodies that are racialized, right? And people's access to mental health. There's already so much stigma. You fight every single day to survive in a Black body, as a Black body or a brown body, and then you add a criminal record on top of that. You add mental health on top of that. You add like home and income and food security on top of that, right? So you've got multiple layers of trauma that you need to work through, and you're trying to survive, right? And I do want to say really quickly, because I know I haven't said this, but I do also want to make sure that I'm clear about, Black folks are we're incredibly resilient, and we have agency. And I don't want to, postulate a narrative around victimology that positions us as, in a particular light, right? Because while we know that the system will continue to perpetuate violence against us, right, we have agency and we have choice. And we know that whenever we exercise that agency and choice, that is when the system comes at us even harder, right? And so if anything, yet again, God knows, unfortunately, George Floyd is yet another reminder of the importance of collective solidarity and organizing, right? We saw in Minneapolis, the police were out in droves shooting rubber bullets into crowds that were masked and peacefully protesting, okay? Peep that. We know at Trinity Bellwoods Park on Sunday that we saw an example of what privilege looks like when you have 10,000 white folks, right, who are sitting down there and a mayor who goes down without a mask. And then you also have simultaneously the police on standby in Etobicoke, right, ready to ticket folks who are celebrating Eid. People don't know about that, right? So if you juxtapose those two situations, Trinity Bellwoods Park, right, and folks in Etobicoke celebrating Eid, Black and brown bodies, white bodies, right? This is why I'm saying they said they issued several tickets. They issued four tickets, right? That's what privilege looks like.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Thank you for bringing that up. It's a great comparison of what's happening here in our own city just a couple of days ago.
Absolutely.
So someone is asking, do you have a resource list of community support? Is this something that Keep Six can put together? Yes, definitely. Keep Six, we could, Rachel, maybe this is something that we could jump on and do, giving us more work. But yeah, we will definitely put something together, link it to our Instagram account and to our other social media platforms. I know, thank you, Rachel. We have about 2 minutes. Is there any testing system in prison put in place to test inmates? I'm guessing for COVID-19.
Right. So the CSC has issued, if you go to the CSC website, you'll see that they have issued their protocol and procedure. There are 300, and they conducted tests in the institutions. I have my stats here. They have as of yesterday, they had 343 cases of COVID positive folks in the federal system. 2 folks have passed away. So there are, as per CSC, there are procedures and guidelines that have been in place to test prisoners. That's what we are being told.
Okay. Right. Okay, great. I know there are some other questions. We will be posting this to our IG Live as well as our YouTube page and channel. So if you do have questions, please put them there. We will do our best to answer them all. Ray, thank you so much. I have thoroughly enjoyed this discussion. This is the discussion that I needed today. So I thank you for being here, and I thank everyone for your questioning. And yeah, stay tuned, everybody. Ray, again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
You are welcome. Anytime.
Take care.
All right. Take care. Thank you. Bye. Be safe.
You too, hon.
Thanks.
It's like so cool reading all these comments.
Yeah, I know. The comments are amazing. So everybody, as we wrap up, I am just going to say again, thank you everyone for being here. Thank you everyone for being such an engaging audience. Thank you for your questions, right? We love having your questions. We are going to do our very best to answer them all. Next week, it's going to be Rachel co-hosting, my wonderful co-host Rachel, and we are going to be kicking off June highlighting women in the community. Rachel will be having a a candid discussion about the criminalization of women. We're going to be continuing that discussion with Arlene Pitts. So next week, same time, same place with Arlene Pitts. Thank you so much, everyone.